First thing first, guys. How are you?
Oh, we're doing well, thank you. Yeah, all right.
Okay. Well, before we talk about Boyking, I'd like to go back to present tense quickly. Now, having made Boyking, how do you look back at present tense?
Well, I mean, I'm very proud of that record, but I think in some ways this record's a continuation. In some ways, it's a reaction. I think present tense was obviously very synthetic, and there are a lot of love songs on present tense, and I think this record is a lot more cruel. You know, there's a lot of sex, but not a lot of love, and I do think like thematically and sonically there is a kind of line you can draw back to present tense, definitely. But I feel like certainly like we learned a lot in present tense, learned a lot about production and a lot about the studio and a lot about how to use these machines we just got. You know what I mean? But yeah, I think this one we treated rather differently.
You mentioned the word cruel, and in a sense it was a reaction, you say. So to what was it a reaction? Sonically or thematically?
Emotionally, I think. Okay. I always thought our music was a kind of way of circumnavigating the abyss, kind of staying on the outskirts, like that's the dark place, right there, and I'm going to stay here in the safe zone. And then you realise the more you kind of try and stay away from it, that it just grows and it becomes you. So I think Boyking became just backstroking in the abyss, just kind of living it, being it, and kind of reveling in it, and enjoying, celebrating the darkness. And I think present tense, we always said, was very clear-eyed. It was kind of quite sedate, kind of quite calculated. And this is kind of the natural revolution, the natural evolution from that kind of method is either maths or rock and roll.
Right.
And we definitely took the left into rock and roll and kind of stopped thinking and started doing.
Yeah.
In that sense, was there a turning point to speak of, or a certain moment when you noticed that you were gravitating more towards the darker themes? And
I think the first breakthrough track really, and kind of why it's the first track on Boyking, was Big Cat. That was the first time the kind of emotional attitude, the aggressive delivery was kind of soundtracked with aggressive guitars and a kind of funky, irresistible kind of groove, and we were like, we've been trying to do this for a long time, and we began to feel like we were making songs that we were always meant to make and that had always existed, and that's when you know you're in the right place.
What made this period in time then suitable to get that out?
I think it was a coming together, like a bottleneck of our emotional place, like the sense of, wow, we're still doing this, we're survivors, let's enjoy it, let's revel in it, you know, we're still in a rock band, let's be the guys in a rock band. And kind of craft, like 5 albums, you need to be able to record and write a song.
Sure.
So those two things coming together meant we were kind of ready just to unleash, just to dare, to do stuff that was kind of preposterous and absurd and felt kind of dangerous. Like we were doing a lot of things that we said we'd never do.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I'm enjoying that setup as well. I'm enjoying like sort of using those kind of tropes and cliches to our advantage. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like it's quite enjoyable. I like at the same time there's a lot of aggression on this record. It's also like we're also like laughing our asses off when we made it. Sometimes it's like, you know, sometimes it is like joyous and funny. You know what I mean?
Well, that's what I was wondering, because often art reflects life. So in that sense, were you in a darker period while making the record, or as you say, there were also lighthearted moments? Well,
I think there was a need to like express ourselves. Do you know what I mean? I think this record is a lot like I said, I'm saying a lot of the shackles kind of get taken off, and like that need to kind of like act something out was really there. Do you know what I mean? I think we felt a little bit constrained and a little bit kind of I don't know, like we needed somewhere else to go. Do you know what I mean? And I think we kind of found it just by making the biggest noise we could sometimes, and like then trying to marry that to something that was a little more heartfelt, a little more musical. You know?
I think it was a darker time in a lot of ways, you know, and you can either react to that darkness with a heaviness or with a lightness.
Right.
And we kind of made the album as if we had nothing to lose. We held it with a lightness of. And that's why I think the album's kind of joyous. It's kind of dark and dirty and a bit wrong, but it's joyous, you know.
But what you just mentioned is quite interesting, where you say you were survivors. When you started this band, where did you think you'd end up?
Well, you don't know where you're going to end up, and we don't know where this record's going to take us.
Sure.
And it's an adventure, but you have to submit to the adventure. That's the key thing. Like, you can't control it, it controls you. And again, this record feels like an adventure, and that's, I guess, why we're still making it, is because it is a free fall. We're not quite sure when the bungee is going to pull us back up, or if it will. But for God's sake, enjoy it while it is, and also express yourself while you're doing it. You know, you can either fall in a ball, or you can fall in a head first and kind of, feel it.
Yeah, well, there's another thing. There's an element of this record. Like, come on, then. How do you think of that, then? How do you like? It's like provocative. Do you know what I mean? I think. Sorry, that sounds very Spinal Tap, but you know what I mean. There is an element of that. There's an element of that kind of like absurdity and like surrendering yourself to like not particularly caring so much. You know what I mean? Or enjoying the absurdity as well.
Is that a easy thing to do in this business?
No, I think it requires a huge amount of... Well, personally, some people might find it easy. I find I have to fool myself.
Okay.
I think it takes blind belief. It takes blind faith. And, you know, making a record is kind of like pulling off an outrageous stunt. Like, all along, you think you're going to get burnt, and you think you're going to get some kind of catastrophic impalement, and but that makes the stunt all the more kind of glorious when it comes off. So no, I don't think it is easy. Okay. But that's kind of the job, is to hold your nerve. The whole job is like holding your nerve. Keep it together for when you kind of really have to deliver.
So can you take me to maybe a moment in the process where you weren't sure if you could hold your nerve, and then maybe one of you kind of convinced the other of...
Well, I mean, for instance, I remember when Tom turned up with this kind of outrageous white guitar, this outrageous axe, and had a skyscraper of amps and started making these kind of absurd noises.
They call them dime bag squeals.
And yeah, I remember him having to kind of convince me of the artistic value of this, and me like scratching my chin like, all right, I'm working on it. And eventually he was so right, you know, that it's the things that are most borderline taboo and kind of like dangerous that are the things that eventually kind of win you over and are most powerful.
That's it. And also, like, I think we realised that sometimes there were points where maybe we'd been a bit backed ourselves into a corner a little bit, like kind of like you know, this kind of as if our music was some kind of like intellectual construct. Do you know what I mean? And I think we wanted to kind of break with that a little bit. So I mean, this record is there are moments of it being a little bit dumb, and it's certainly instinctive, and it is a bit of a mess, you know. And that's kind of, that was like, it wasn't how we designed it, but it's like, that's great, leave it, you know.
Was there a design before you kind of started working on it?
There was a loose design, you know. I wanted to make a soul record.
Okay.
I wanted to kind of have a liquid groove with kind of like heartfelt, emotional lyrics over the top, and I guess in some sense we made that in a kind of blue-eyed, Justin Timberlake-esque way, but in other senses it was put through the guise of a kind of angst and aggression and brutality of heavier music, and we hijacked things. We hijacked tropes to kind of, for our own purposes, and so there wasn't, I mean, to be a proper band you can't really have design. You kind of submit yourself to the human factor of it. Yeah.
I mean, obviously there's ideas beforehand, but like they do get changed as you go, you know, and ultimately like, if you are a band, you are kind of recording in real time as well. So like, I mean, obviously you do some elements of production and programming and overdubs, but most of this record especially was made live, you know. So like that, something else happens, you know. There's a fifth ingredient there, you know, which is which you try and have control over, but really, a good take from a bad take, it's kind of hard to tell. You can tell whether it's correct or not, but if it's good or bad, it's kind of a matter of judgment.
So when did that feel come together? Kind of when you knew, okay, now we know which way we're headed with this.
Late on.
Okay.
It was too late.
Too late.
No, it wasn't too late. It was like, it was a photo finish.
Okay.
Which is, it was always going to be. If we'd given ourselves 5 years, it was going to be a photo finish. And I think there is a threshold that you reach where everything kind of, this is where the blind belief comes in that you will reach it. There was kind of a critical mass, wasn't there? We had a lot of noise, a lot of material, and a lot of stuff. And once we found like the method, we just put everything through that method and it all worked, you know. And the method kind of involved the kind of slinky Prince-esque synths and the kind of sultry feel, but yeah, I say with the kind of reimagining of the kind of teenage acts, and also, you know, kind of attitude vocals. You know, we kind of at times we felt like we were our own little Rolling Stones in there. Like the guys were egging me on to be like a Jagger or something. Yeah. And the more I'd give, the more they'd be like, oh yeah, and the more you would kind of make like an incredible kind of shred. We'd be like, oh my god, that's powerful, and it's feeding off each other's energy. You know, bands are like, if they work, they're like reactors. Like they just emit of energy and a heat, and you just kind of have to harness it and let it take you up with the Gulf Stream, you know.
But in that sense then, because you say it's always going to be a photo finish, does that add pressure then in a way, because maybe you haven't had that energy in the studio yet and you're thinking, will it come?
I think it adds necessary pressure. Do you know what I mean? I think it's you need a goal. You need, you know, in order to do that, and you also need to feel a little bit. I mean, this sounds like nonsense, but you need to feel uncomfortable. You need to feel like I need to get this. I need to do this to the best of my ability. You know, you're not like, yeah, I've got this. You know, you need to be on the edge of something. You need to be reaching for something you don't have yet. Right. You know what I mean? I think that's that's one of the things that going into a studio can do to you. You know what I mean? It really focuses your mind and really. Because, you know, the clock is ticking, it's expensive, you know, and like, if you don't get this now, you're never going to get it, so go get in there, you know.